If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you of your own journey, don't leave without hitting that subscribe button. On this channel, we share powerful stories of resilience, justice, and quiet triumph, especially for those who've been overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside. Whether it's in the workplace, within families, or in life's toughest chapters, these stories prove one thing: it's never too late to take back your power. Like the video if you believe experience still matters. Comment below if you've ever faced a similar situation. We'd love to hear your voice. And most importantly, subscribe to stay updated with more stories that honor strength, wisdom, and second chances. Because here, every view, every comment, and every subscription helps us keep telling the stories that deserve to be heard. They say timing is everything. I should have sensed mine was off the moment Lucas gave me that too smooth grin. It was a gray Monday in Seattle, the kind that made every light feel fluorescent and artificial. Lucas had only been CEO of Velmyra Systems for 3 weeks, but he was already fluent in corporate charm. Too fluent. His smile that morning felt rehearsed, like a campaign promise. I'd spent my weekend preparing for this conversation: revenue trends, client renewals, and the scalable performance framework I'd spent years developing. I was 52, not new to this game. I had overseen a 6-nation integration of our data flow systems, transforming a fragmented patchwork of tools into a unified, predictive model that now drove our key metrics worldwide. That same system landed us a $70 million enterprise contract last quarter. This wasn't just about a raise. It was overdue acknowledgement. "Thanks for coming in, Rebecca," Lucas said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. His office was sterile, bare walls, a whiteboard with scribbled acronyms, and a lonely plant in the corner already sagging. "I didn't waste time. I'd like to discuss an adjustment to my compensation," I said clearly, to reflect the increased scope I've taken on. He gave a slow nod, too slow. "I've reviewed your file," he began. "Your contributions, especially with the global performance system, are impressive. But we're in the midst of a broader structural evaluation. For now, we're pausing all salary discussions. It's not personal. Just timing." There it was again. Timing. I didn't flinch. "So nothing this quarter?" "Not yet," he said, already standing to end the meeting. Back in the hallway, my phone buzzed with a team update. "New workflow strategy. Sync approved." I paused near the analytics wall outside the strategy hub. A redesigned architecture diagram covered the board, detailed, color-coded, freshly printed. It was my design. Every logic stream. Every metric. But instead of my name, it was labeled Jason L. He hadn't even changed the layout. Just replaced the credit. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about bad timing. This was the beginning of something else. At 6:12 a.m. the next morning, a calendar invite appeared. Restructure discussion, 10:30 a.m. No details, no notes, just 15 minutes blocked between 2 of Lucas's budget briefings. I arrived at 10:28. Lucas didn't look up from his laptop. "Come in," he said flatly. No handshake. No pleasantries. Just cold air and silence. He shut his laptop and folded his hands. "Rebecca, I'll be direct. As part of the division reorganization, you'll be transitioning into a senior analyst role in an advisory capacity. You'll keep your salary and benefits, but moving forward, you'll report to Jason. He'll lead the Global Performance Initiative." Jason? The same Jason who, a few weeks ago, had asked me to explain what real-time load distribution meant? The same Jason who once broke the sandbox environment running a basic model because he forgot to set a data cap? I kept my face still, but inside, I wasn't quiet. This wasn't a demotion. It was a theft wrapped in politeness. And I wasn't about to let it end like this. I parted my lips to speak, but hesitated. Lucas carried on, his tone flat, like he was reading from prepared notes rather than having a conversation. "This isn't a reflection of your performance," he said. "It's a strategic move. Jason brings a different leadership style, one more in sync with our growth model. We deeply respect your experience, but we also need a vision aligned with our future direction. I swallowed, a knot forming in my throat. So, what does this advisory role actually mean? I asked, my voice even. Think of it as a support position, he replied. You'll offer historical insights, mentorship to the team, but won't be involved in day-to-day leadership or tactical decisions. Support. Historical insights. It felt like being cut out of my own creation and asked to spectate through a glass wall. Like they'd excised the mind that built the system and left only the outline behind. The meeting wrapped within minutes, no time for back and forth, just a well-rehearsed close. We appreciate your flexibility, and we're counting on your cooperation as we move forward. I returned to my workstation. The office buzzed with routine energy, coworkers chatting about upcoming sprints, coffee orders, and Q2 reviews. No one seemed to notice the shift that had just occurred. I sat down and opened my email. There it was, a bold headline in a company-wide message. Exciting update, Jason Liu named lead strategist, Global Performance Initiative. His photo was attached grinning, polished, wearing a suit that still had creases from the department store rack. My name was nowhere in the announcement. I stared at the message as it blurred before me. 5 years of strategy sessions, client walkthroughs, system blueprints, and sleepless debugging, all rewritten under someone else's nameplate. The hurt was sharp, but something deeper stirred, a quiet clarity. This wasn't evolution. It was erasure. At 9:15 the next morning, the quarterly strategy briefing began. I sat quietly in the third row middle seat, just far enough to be invisible. Lucas took the stage, microphone in hand, his confidence as carefully tailored as his blazer. Behind him, animated charts rose in perfect arcs, logos rotated beside glowing bar graphs. The title flashed across the screen, Q2 Strategic Outlook, Scaling with Vision. His voice echoed across the room. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge someone who's been pivotal in building our performance infrastructure, an engine behind our $60 million expansion. My heart skipped. Maybe, just maybe, he'd name me. Let's give a warm welcome to Jason Liu, our newly appointed lead strategist. The room erupted in applause. Jason stood, smiling like he was born for this moment, adjusting his jacket and walking confidently to the front. I didn't move. No one turned my way. Lucas continued. Jason reimagined our metric logic, streamlined our analytics framework, and championed a data-first culture that's setting industry benchmarks. I kept my eyes on the slide deck, recognizing each diagram, index path, and weighted formula. My fingerprints were on every frame. And then I saw it. In the bottom corner of the slide, in small gray font, Rebecca_perfmodel_final_v2.pptx. They hadn't even changed the file name. The applause faded into silence. I sat still, unseen, but very much awake now. I sat there, hands clasped gently in my lap, nodding occasionally like a polite visitor at someone else's celebration. All around me, colleagues murmured praise for Jason, his vision, his energy, how quickly he'd revamped the model. My ID badge hung heavy around my neck. Not physically, but symbolically. It felt like it belonged to a woman who didn't exist anymore. At 1:52 p.m., a message hit my inbox. Subject: Please congratulate Jason. I clicked. The top of the email displayed a stylized graphic, one of my original performance dashboards. Slightly edited, cropped just enough to obscure the signature layout, but I knew it instantly. It was mine. No one seemed to notice. Or maybe no one cared. I walked away from my desk, found an empty conference room, and closed the door behind me. Lights off, I sat in the dark. There were no tears. No outburst. Only a silence so deep it throbbed inside my ears. This wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't politics behind closed doors. It was broadcasted, celebrated, normalized. I didn't respond. Didn't forward it to Lucas. Didn't call out the theft. Instead, I did something they never anticipate. I got quiet, but focused. By 7:15 the next morning, I was back at my desk. A fresh cup of coffee. Sleeves rolled. Logged in. No one even looked up. I opened the system backend, the platform I'd architected, expanded, and stabilized over 5 years. Jason had already made superficial changes, relabeling tabs, rearranging menus, adjusting interface palettes. Surface stuff. Optics. But the structure? The engine? Untouched. Probably because they didn't know how. What they also didn't know, I'd embedded substructures into the code, stabilizers for data spikes, logic recalibrators, memory scrubs. Quiet mechanisms that kept the performance model resilient and self-correcting. I built them before we even had a QA manager. They were undocumented, undetected. I listened to music through my headphones, kept my expression neutral. People walked past my desk like I was invisible. I smiled softly, nodded politely. But my eyes were on the code line by line, cell by cell, studying the very choices that built the house they were now living in. And then I found it. Buried deep in the engine, the predictive simulation model, the KPI matrix, the risk forecast module, all of it still running on NutraFrame, a licensed performance framework I'd purchased myself in 2020. Back then, we were denied funding for platform upgrades. I used my own card to get a developer license. Quietly, just to keep things stable. I opened the licensing panel. It read, License Owner, Rebecca Chang. Type, Developer Enterprise. Status, Active. Auto-renewal date, March 14th, 2026. I leaned back, exhaled slowly. They had pushed me aside, stripped my title, replaced my credit. But their entire performance infrastructure, the engine of a $70 million contract, was still riding on software tied to my personal license. Not to the company. Not to Jason. To me. I said nothing. Not that day. Not the next. I didn't storm into Lucas's office or CC Legal. Instead, I made quiet moves, isolating key nodes, adjusting parameters, setting backups. Preparing. Because while they looked at the interface and assumed control, they forgot the truth of any real system. The visible layer is never where the power lives. By 8:20 a.m., I was logged back in focused, calm, already working. They thought I was fading out. But they were only seeing the screen. And the real story was still running underneath. Jason had claimed my former office. Lucas had shifted focus to his next internal campaign. HR had already reduced my entire project scope to a few sterile bullet points. No one questioned a thing. Perfect. I didn't feel rage anymore. Anger is noisy and reckless. What had taken its place was something colder, measured, deliberate. I understood every inch of that system, its architecture, its pulse, and I knew exactly how to rewire it. Not to destroy it. Just to let it unravel quietly. I began with the engagement model. Originally, it emphasized quality, long-term retention, conversion precision, balanced growth signals. Under Jason's leadership, quantity had taken center stage. So I leaned into that. I rewrote the logic to reward bursts of shallow traffic, temporary visits, repeat form submissions, click-heavy pages. The charts would light up with activity, flashy and inflated. But underneath? It would be nothing more than air. Pretty numbers with no substance. Then I moved to the forecast module. The original system processed 7 variables: supplier latency, regional demand waves, logistics congestion, and more. I trimmed it to 4. On the surface, it still appeared functional. But I added a subtle deviation in the projection engine, just enough to misalign demand predictions by 7 to 12%. Not catastrophic. Just quiet dysfunction. Just enough for trends to drift off course, undetected until the margins cracked. Finally, I revised the monitoring system. It used to be predictive, smart enough to detect patterns before they became problems. But now, I dialed it down. I removed 3 key anomaly triggers and replaced them with passive flags marked pending review. To everyone else, It would look stable until it wasn't. By 11:40 that morning, the quarterly performance meeting was underway. Jason stood before the team, pointer in hand, walking us through his dashboard. The display bathed the room in green, everything rising, everything humming. Conversion rates, client feedback loops, market reach, it all looked pristine. Lucas leaned back, hands behind his head, clearly pleased. Now this, he grinned, this is how you modernize an outdated platform. No one saw me smile in the second-to-last seat. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't revenge. It was calculation. Let them enjoy their victory parade. Let them believe they'd elevated the system. Let them trust the numbers. After all, that's what they wanted most. I wasn't sabotaging. I was documenting. Watching every metric they distorted. Noticing every inconsistency they ignored. When the gap widened, when the clients called and projections missed and alerts failed, I wouldn't have to say a word. The data would speak. At 9:30 the next day, the glass conference room was already filling up. Staff took their seats, lattes in hand, small talk buzzing through the space. A presentation looped across the screen, rising bar graphs, animated metrics, all green arrows, and clean growth. I sat near the end of the table, quiet, still. Jason stood at the front, confident, rehearsed. His navy jacket still showed faint creases near the shoulders. He cleared his throat. Good morning, everyone. Let's take a look at what real progress looks like. And I leaned back, hands folded, ready. They thought the system had changed, but they were still inside mine. Mia blinked a few times, then offered a hesitant smile. I mean, maybe, she said, then shrugged. But this isn't really your lane anymore, right? Her words struck harder than I expected. Not loud, just sharp. I'm not trying to take over, I replied, keeping my tone calm. I just think someone needs to. Rebecca, she said gently, cutting in. We all know what you did here. You built the framework everyone depends on. But people are moving on. Maybe it's time you did too. I nodded too quickly, mouth forming a polite smile I didn't feel. Right. Of course. By 10:20 a.m., I was back at my desk. The office buzzed as it always did, collaboration huddles, hallway updates, laughter near the break area, but none of it included me. I was surrounded by motion, yet untouched by it, like a statue placed too close to the action. Then my inbox pinged. Subject: urgent. Northbridge Health delivery failure. I opened it. A critical order hadn't arrived. The dashboard showed a clean pass, but the confirmation report from the client told a different story. Missing product lines, outdated inventory, absent compliance documents. And no flags had been raised. The alert system was silent. Because I had made it that way. Northbridge wasn't just any client. They were one of our longest partners, high value and loyal. But by 2:45 p.m., the news had already spread. They were canceling their renewal. $8 million. Gone. Jason called it a supply snag. Lucas labeled it client miscommunication. But I knew. This wasn't a bump. It was the first break. Late in the day, a new name appeared on the IT calendar. Ken Albright, Systems Optimization Consultant. A message followed in the tech chat. External contractor. Brought in for back-end analysis. Translation. Lucas felt something shift, but was too stubborn to call the one who designed the system from the ground up. By 4:50 p.m., Ken was seated next to Jason, eyes narrowed at the lines of code on screen. I listened quietly from a few desks away. I'm trying to track the forecast engine, Ken said. But I can't find the logic anchors. These references, they're buried or abstracted out. Jason leaned back. She made it messy on purpose. Ken paused. Or maybe just, ahead of you. Jason didn't respond. Neither did I. Because I had already stepped away from their meetings, their decisions, their blame games. I was no longer part of the solution. Or their scapegoat. I was simply watching now. Watching as the floorboards shifted beneath their polished shoes. And for the first time, I didn't reach for a fix. By 7:15 the next morning, I was the only one in the office. No background noise. No interruptions. Just the soft glow of my monitor and the rhythm of typing keys echoing in the quiet. That morning's board meeting was set for 8:30. They'd be reviewing the systems update Jason had prepared. I'd already seen the presentation. Bar graphs glowing in green, inflated KPIs, milestone banners backed by hollow infrastructure. But this time, it wouldn't just be talk. Because the numbers would answer for themselves. I pulled up the embedded program I'd placed weeks ago, disguised beneath generic log files, inactive until the exact configuration Jason had prepared was loaded into the executive dashboard. A quiet key turned. A silent script activated. And no one else in that building had any idea what they were about to see. No one knew it was embedded there. Not Jason. Not Lucas. Certainly no one from compliance. The message wasn't flashy or loud. It was just 6 sentences, subtle, deliberate, woven quietly into the back end of the automated executive summary. I clicked execute. At exactly 8:36 a.m., it deployed. The board session began as expected. Jason launched into his polished introduction, grinning as he flipped through slides. Same tailored navy jacket. Same overconfident cadence. Lucas, as usual, leaned forward with theatrical interest, nodding like he was hearing brilliance for the first time. Then the third slide appeared. The room shifted. On screen, just beneath the forecast model's main graph, a soft gray message appeared, small enough to miss if you weren't looking, but impossible to ignore once seen. Metrics presented are optimized, not verified. Trace system alterations. Ask who adjusted the logic. For a beat, no one spoke. Someone cleared their throat. A laptop key clicked nervously. Jason stared, frozen mid-sentence. Lucas squinted, adjusting his glasses as if focus alone could make it disappear. A woman in a crisp ivory jacket, board member, I remembered, lifted her eyes from the screen. Is this supposed to be part of the deck? Jason's voice caught. It must be a template glitch. Just ignore it. Let's keep moving. Wait a second, another voice interrupted. It was Martin Cross, head of strategy, a man whose name carried weight in every corridor. Who authored this content? Jason stumbled. He flipped back through earlier slides, searching for a clean version. But it wouldn't matter. The note wasn't tied to a slide. It was written into the system's data layer. Every output had inherited it. That's when it happened. Martin, already suspicious, checked his email. Like every board member, he'd received the raw export directly from the reporting system. There it was again. The same gray text, embedded at the bottom of the message body. Plain. Permanent. Martin clicked reply all. Who was Rebecca Chang, and why wasn't she invited to this meeting? The atmosphere cracked. A slow shift of posture. Nervous glances. The air inside the room was no longer confident. It was cautious. At 8:42 a.m., my inbox chimed. Subject: System Integrity Inquiry. Immediate availability requested. From Vanessa Price, Chief Compliance Officer. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, fingers calm, heart steady. I hadn't disrupted the meeting. I hadn't crashed their presentation. All I did was let the truth appear, just loud enough to reach the right ears. For weeks, I'd been invisible. Today, I was everywhere. By 10:30 a.m., I was asked to report to the executive conference suite on the 11th floor, a space I hadn't entered since my transition. The message was polite but urgent. We'd value your input regarding data integrity and forecasting anomalies. I walked in with the confidence of someone who already understood the room. Jason sat stiffly in his chair, pale under the LED lights. Lucas lingered by the screen, trying to look composed. Around the table sat directors, legal, and, unexpectedly, an observer from Northbridge Health. I took the last seat. No greetings. No smiles. Martin cleared his throat. Ms. Chang, we'd like to better understand your connection to the performance system currently in place. I opened my laptop and connected to the monitor. I didn't posture. I didn't gloat. I presented. The predictive model is failing due to a structural misalignment introduced during recent reconfigurations. Variables critical to adaptive forecasting were removed without compensatory adjustments. As a result, drift accumulates over time, affecting all forward projections. Click. Slide after slide of comparative overlays before and after. Raw logs. Simulated performance versus actual. Facts. Numbers. Unmistakable. I displayed the comparative overlay between the original framework and the current revisions. The discrepancies were clear and impossible to dismiss. Additionally, I said, moving to the next slide, 3 primary tiers of the alert infrastructure were deactivated. I highlighted the error logs. This is why delivery failures slipped through. The alerts weren't delayed, they were silenced. Heads turned. Jason didn't respond. He stared at the screen like it had betrayed him. Here's the access log, I continued, pulling up the audit trail. This shows every modification, who executed it, and when. Line after line of entries appeared, timestamped, with user IDs attached. Each signature traces back to Jason Liu's login credentials. Still, no response. Then came the moment no one expected. The Northbridge representative stood from his seat. Calm. Composed. "I'll be brief," he began. "We've partnered with Ms. Chang for 5 years. Her system is the backbone of our infrastructure. When reliability dropped, we knew something had changed. And today, we understand why." He looked directly at the board. "As of this morning, we've moved our full infrastructure development budget into a private consulting agreement under Ms. Chang. We no longer trust this organization's current direction. We trust her." The room froze. Lucas blinked, unable to respond. Jason opened his mouth, then shut it again without a sound. I said nothing. I didn't gloat. No victory lap. I calmly closed my laptop, stood, and addressed the room. "I'll forward all supporting documentation to compliance. The system logs speak for the rest." Then I turned and walked out quietly, cleanly. Because the loudest victories don't come from shouting. They come from the silence that follows truth. By 8:20 the next morning, I packed my belongings into a small canvas tote, no fanfare, no farewell message. Just a few pens, a charger, and a folded blazer. My nameplate had already been removed. No one had bothered to replace it. I didn't mind. The elevator ride from the top floor felt slower than usual. Or maybe I was just present enough to feel it. No rush. No tension. Peace for the first time in months. As I crossed the building's glass-walled lobby, I heard someone behind me. "You're not even going to say goodbye?" I turned to see Sarah, from finance, standing a few steps away. She gave a sheepish smile. She fell into step beside me, glancing around before speaking. "You don't have to explain anything," she said gently. "Just, for what it's worth, people noticed. Maybe no one said it, but we saw." I gave a small nod. Words weren't necessary. Near the door, another familiar face appeared, Henry, one of the junior analysts. He didn't say anything, just passed by with a respectful glance and slipped into the revolving door. I stepped outside. The spring air hit different, clean, sharp, alive. I pulled out my phone and tapped the starred message I'd saved from the night before. Subject: confirmed offer, principal architect, Northbridge Health. Double the salary. Full creative control. No politics. Just meaningful work, trusted execution, and space to build systems that mattered. As I read, another message caught my eye. An old one long archived. Subject: role realignment. I let out a quiet laugh. I'd thought that meeting had ended me. But now, standing in the sunlight, I finally understood. That wasn't the end. It was a pivot. Not a step down. A step up. And this time, on my terms.